When Insta360 approached me to test out their line of cameras for FPV, I did wonder why this one wasn't a model I had considered for freestyle before. This is the Insta360 1RS, and on checking the specs, it looked totally acceptable. Good field of view, 4K resolution, similar weight to the GoPro 8, so I agreed to give it a go. And for the last couple of months, I've been using it as my main HD camera to see if I can answer the question, will I make this my go-to camera for FPV? First, I'll address the elephant in the room, which is the big difference this has compared to any other action camera. It can be a 360 camera or a regular 4K camera with these different lens modules. I printed a different mount for 360 footage that keeps the camera far away from the quad and gives some really unique shots. Recording 360 is a discipline all by itself, to be honest, because the potential when editing is quite daunting. You can look in any direction, not just forward, related to the quad, so it opens up some dizzying potential, which has taken some getting used to make stuff that looks cool. Also, seeing the quad in shot with the mount positions far away enough gives you a pretty cool look at how the quad moves during tricks. Quick shout out here to fellow Superflight pilot Chrissy Boy for doing a lot of cool 360 shots well before I received mine. So definitely worth checking his Instagram out if you like this kind of mind-bending perspective. He's got a bunch of cool stuff there. I will likely do a video more about editing 360 footage as it's quite detailed, but for now, the focus of this video is about regular freestyle and if this camera is a good fit for that. So I'll be talking about it as a 4K camera from here on out. The camera comes in at 128 grams, which is only a few grams heavier than the GoPro 8 out the box. I think this is about 125, yeah, 124. This is the camera that I was previously using and will be using as a comparison throughout. Initially, I was flying it in a custom mount straight out the box, and it felt very similar to the GoPro 8. But lately, I've been using one of these iFlight USB to balance cable connectors and running the camera without a battery. The battery on this thing is pretty hefty, so it drops down to just 88 grams without it, 89 here. But I put a bit of that back on because I designed like a really chunky mount for extra protection and a way to run the cable internally to stop it getting knocked out. Without the battery module though, there is one negative, as it actually doubles as a way to keep the sort of camera and core unit together. So it's more likely to split apart in a heavy crash. These come apart a little bit more easily, and that has happened once with this current mount design that I've got. So I may need to iterate it a bit. But the whole setup has been a really good compromise of weight and durability. So when it comes to durability, I'm going to start with the negative first. There's no changeable glass lens, which was a really nice feature of the GoPro 7 and 10, that you have that sort of last line of defense. So if something was to go through your ND filter and tempered glass, you could still switch the lens. But I'm happy to say in the last 2 months, I've not managed to do that. I've been using a standard TBS Jello Guard ND filter and a tempered glass screen protector on the lens, and it's been enough. I have smashed the tempered glass a couple of times, but luckily never got through to the actual lens. Apart from that though, this thing is solid. I've smashed it so hard that the two parts have come apart and the lens module did actually eject from the mount. But just putting it back on and putting it back together, and it kept on going like nothing happened really. It's not showing any signs of damage at all, unlike the GoPro, you know, the usual GoPro traits like stopping recording randomly during flight or glitchy files being written after a bunch of hits. It's just as reliable as the day I got it, and that's pretty impressive, I think. A large part of that is probably the heavy duty mount that I've made, but with the lower form factor, it did allow to make some like kind of heftier TPU on the top to keep it safe. And it still is actually under the profile of the GoPro 8. One other positive of the sort of modular design they've got going on is if the worst does happen and you break the lens or you damage this part, you don't have to replace the whole thing, just the bit you broke. And this 4K lens part is actually the cheapest part. So on the whole, I'm pretty happy with the durability so far. If only someone made like a third-party camera butter style glass replacement, like they did for the GoPro 8, then I think I would give it full marks. Image quality is arguably the most important aspect of a camera, and this little one does well. The sharpness setting out the box is set to ludicrous mode for some reason, but quickly dropping it down to medium or low to taste really in the camera menu fixes that and gives you a much more natural image. Not sure why these action cameras always have sharpness cranked up to 11 by default, but it's always the same. This setting is global though, so just do it once and forget it exists. You have the usual array of frame rates and aspect ratios as standard on this generation of action camera, but the FPS does cap out at 60, so I know that some can go up to 120, and if you're looking to do that, then that isn't an option here. But the bitrate caps out at 100 megabits per second anyway for all files, so you probably would want something more than that if you were doing 120 anyway. It does have a very similar low light performance as all the other action cameras in this class as well, so at night it can get noisy. But I've been experimenting with using a little post-processing. This clip now is using neat video noise reduction, and the image is actually really usable. Dynamic range, similar to the GoPro, has 3 picture profiles. You've got log, which is actually pretty flat, pretty close to an actual log style output. I mean, it's not true log, but it is really flat, and it might even be a little bit too flat for 8-bit files. You do see a little bit of clipping in the shadows sometimes, but it's still cool to see. The standard profile is really nice, probably the best one to use all in all, and there is a vivid profile, which is the kind of no color grading approach, just want something straight out of the camera. Not something I'd personally use, but the standard and flat are decent options. The only negative I could really see is that if you don't lock the exposure and just use auto adjustment, it is a touch slower, like in terms of the compensation that I'd like, and you can see a little bit of stepping, but locking down the exposure, and the thing looks great. So overall, this camera is doing very well. Just a quick related note to image quality, and something that really impressed me was the level of post-processing you can do in their mobile app. So they've got a really cool mobile app. There's a full range of controls here for exposure, temperature, contrast, sharpness, all that kind of stuff. There's also a button called Color Plus, and it kind of seems like it's a one-click solution to color grading, and it does do a really nice job. From all the footage I've used, it does actually seem really good. It does have filters and other gimmicky stuff as well. But yeah, it's a really nice application, really responsive, and you can do edits while the file's on the camera, or you can download to your phone for later. Generally very versatile. But considering there's an adjustable sharpness in the app, it does make the decision to have very high sharpness be the sort of the default on the camera even more confusing. One of life's mysteries, I guess. Now this probably seems a bit weird. I wouldn't normally group stabilization and field of view into the same category, but Insta360 does something quite interesting with its recording. In the resolution options, there's 2 modes at the top of the screen. There's flow state and post. With flow state, stabilization is baked into the recording like you'd expect, but post allows you to add it if you want it after it's been recorded. And this is a really cool feature. But if you put it in post mode, it also doesn't matter what field of view you pick either, as this can be edited in post as well. Everything that's done in camera, like field of view, linearization, stabilization, and cropping, can all be done in the application afterwards. So unless you really don't want to do any editing at all, then there's no downside to choosing the post effect. One thing I noticed though is if you open the raw file on a PC after recording in post, the file is a full sensor 4:3 video with no stabilization. Unless you're using 60 FPS recordings, then there is actually a 16:9 cropped sensor. And this is what is used in the Insta360 Studio app, or on your phone, or on Premiere with the plugin to add the stabilization and FOV of your choice. And this is where it gets a bit confusing. So technically the stabilization is good, it is excellent. And if you want to use it for anything but freestyle, I'd recommend it. But personally, I found that it does crop in a little bit too much for my taste. And with faster freestyle, you want the extra field of view because it just gets a bit claustrophobic really without it, and it makes you feel slightly motion sick when viewing fast tricks with it on, in my opinion anyway. The cropping actually points us to another issue. All the 16:9 modes actually crop quite a bit of the frame when processed with their plugin or app. Even with stabilization off, the widest FOV, I think it's like ultra wide, it still crops a little bit of the full image. So I've come up with a workaround that works really well for me. Basically, I use 4K30 with post-stabilization option, so I get the full raw sort of sensor recording, like 4:3 sensor, and then I run it through GyroFlow. It doesn't take long, it converts it to a 16:9, and if you turn the stabilization right down, you get barely any crop in really. And I think it's a much more pleasing image to me than any of the Insta360 modes in camera. And the results are excellent.
it straight to the moon, 'cause we know how to rock it. Ain't no thing you can do, ain't no way to stop it. Now you're feeling it too, let's get it started. Throw your hands in the air while the beat is dropping. Acting like you don't care when everybody's watching. Just keep whipping your hair like that, you got it. Yeah, you're feeling it too, let's get it started. I'm ready, ready. Let's get it, get it. I'm ready, ready. Are you ready, ready? Let's get it started. Charts off the meter, turn it up, blow the speakers, make them all to believers. Break through the surface, tell them open the curtains, give them all what they wanted, yeah. Now let's get it started. Let's get it, get it. Yeah, I'm ready, ready. I'm ready. Are you ready, ready? I'm ready. Let's get it started. Yeah, yeah. I'm ready, ready. Yeah, yeah. Let's get it, get it. I'm ready, ready. Let's go. Are you ready, ready? Let's get it started. Let's get it started. Let's get it, get it. Let's get it started. Let's get it started. Let's get it. Yeah, yeah. Let's get it started.
So with all that considered, the answer for me right now is yes. I will be sticking to the One RS for the foreseeable future. I'm loving the results I've got out of it, and I'm enjoying the extra freedom of having a 360 camera as well when I need it or when I want to mess around with it. They really kind of are, it's like having two cameras really. So I will be doing a video on the 360 mod soon about how I edit the 360 footage, because it's super cool what can be done with this. Also with this mount, not having to worry about charging batteries on it is really awesome. Image quality is great and very editable. You know, if you use the log or standard profiles, you can do a lot of editing with the color afterwards. And if you just like getting quick clips, then the phone app is a really good solution for exporting straight from there to like just sending it to your friends or to social media or whatever. And if you like getting stuck into editing on your PC, as I do, then GyroFlow works really well. Super impressed with that actually. So yeah, good job Insta360. If you're interested in the One RS for yourself, then there is an affiliate link in the description for their store, and I'd be super grateful if you were to use that for your purchase. Anyway, hope this was useful. It was just a quick rundown of the things that I found cool about it. And yeah, it is actually really viable for freestyle, as long as you do a little bit of touching up of the footage and GyroFlow yourself. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.